today on Ag News Daily.
Mike calls me at the right time and says, hey, we're growing in this business that we're in today. You want to be my salesman? And I didn't hesitate. You bet. I don't care if I ride on the back end of a garbage can right now. The biggest thing is the high wear. These combines are getting bigger. The bushels per acre that we're getting now versus what we used to, it's wearing the machines out quicker. So, and then with the economy being the way it is, we're going to be that fit that makes it less expensive to do a repair and then at a quicker time also. That's the biggest thing, the product we build today.
Well, welcome back to the weekly edition of the Ag News Daily Show. Here in studio, Delaney and Tanner having some fun with the headlines that we've got today.
We've got some big ones, Tanner.
We do. I feel like it was going to be a slow news week because of the holiday, but it really picked itself up.
It did. Lots of big headlines for us to tackle, but certainly none of which is the weather.
I know. And we had a long line of severe storms that swept through the Midwest on Friday. This started in parts of Nebraska, came through Iowa and into Illinois. This storm has officially been classified as a derecho by the Storm Prediction Center. The center classifies derechos as wind damage swath that extends more than 240 miles and has wind gusts of at least 58 miles per hour or greater along most of the length of the storm's path. So right now, during May alone, there have been 469 tornadoes, 3,475 severe wind events, and over 1,600 hail events in the U.S. The number of storms reported is the highest for the month of May, if not the highest since 2011. While the number of storms this month has been unusually high, their occurrence has been expected by meteorologists as the country is transitioning away from an El Nino into a La Nina pattern. According to the National Centers for Environmental Prediction, there is now a 49% chance La Nina develops between June and August, and a 69% chance that it will be here sometime between July and September. We do think more rough weather is ahead this summer, as meteorologists believe high winds and big rainstorms will continue throughout the late spring into the summer months because of this transition process, Delaney.
It's going to be interesting to see as we transition from crop planting reports to crop progress and conditions reports, Tanner, what those conditions bring. But corn planting this week wrapped up for at least one state for the week ending May 26th, while most other states made pretty tremendous progress. Farmers in North Carolina wrapped up their planting for the season, which is slightly ahead of their 5-year average pace. Nationwide, 83% of the corn crop has been planted, up from 70% the week prior. Corn has emerged in all of our top 18 corn-growing states, with emergence now sitting around 58%. Soybeans also saw significant progress, now at 68% complete, up from 52% the week prior. Soybean emergence is now at 39%, according to the weekly report. But Tanner, I know you mentioned you're still not quite done wrapping up planting season.
That's correct, and we've got a lot of folks that are talking about replant. Corey, leading candidate for Chief Tractor Officer, stated that's what he's out looking today to make one of those decisions. Unfortunately, the wrath of wildfires is still something that Canada knows all too well. After a historic season, 2024 is off to an active start, with some fire forecasters saying it could rival the 2023 wildfires. In 23, the Canada had historic season, which was measured by many means. Millions upon millions of acres of forest were burnt, according to Matt McDonald, the lead fire weather forecaster for BC Wildfire Service. Right now, all 13 provinces and territories have significant wildfire on the landscape, and particularly in Western Canada and British Columbia. Canada's firefighters are already off to a busier start than they were last year, primarily due to holdover fires. Those fires actually never went away from last year. They just kind of went dormant under the snow. What has happened in the last week has been astonishing. Tens of thousands of acres have been scorched from the fire in British Columbia, and the province of Manitoba is fighting a massive blaze that has already burned more than 86,000 acres last week. While part of the problem is the fires left over from 23, the bigger issue is the multi-year drought that is continuing to fuel these blazes, Delaney.
I didn't realize that it could sit dormant under the snow, so I learned something new there.
Yeah, something about heat signatures, but I want to read more on that myself too.
Absolutely. Well, following a fresh FDA approval, Elanco Animal Health has been reviewed and approved to use the first-in-class methane-reducing feed ingredient in dairy cattle. After extensive multi-year testing, the FDA determined their new product, Bovier, meets safety and efficacy requirements to use the product in lactating dairy cattle. This monumental announcement has the ability to accelerate the opportunity for climate-neutral dairy farming while creating a new revenue stream for dairy farmers across the country, said Chief Executive Jeff Simmons. According to the company's announcement on their website, the science behind Bovaer is unique in that it suppresses the enzymes that are produced in a cow's rumen, and cattle emit that methane through belching and in their manure. So it's supposed to help tamper some of that emission that they are going to release, Tanner. But
interesting news there.
It is. In other dairy news, viral particles were found in some tissue samples of dairy meat this week. The particles were found in a cow that had been culled because it was sick, and a positive test confirmed the cow did have H5N1. The USDA said the meat did not enter into the food supply chain, reassuring consumers. The USDA also confirmed infections in 5 additional herds this week, 3 in South Dakota and 2 in Colorado, now raising the U.S. total to 63 herds in 9 states, Tanner.
The USDA is definitely putting extra effort in their stories to state it is still safe for consumers.
They are indeed.
The Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship announced the detection of the highly pathogenic avian influenza case in Sioux County, Iowa. This affected site is a flock of 4.2 million commercial layer chickens, and this is the first confirmed case in Iowa since December, when Governor Kim Reynolds signed a disaster proclamation in place to assist with the tracking, monitoring, rapid detection, containment, and disposal of infected birds. So good to see that process already working and in place. We also saw Texas lawmakers made major moves in favor of the farmer already in this political legislative year. From property taxes to landowner liability, from cell-cultured meat labeling to the right to farm, the 23 Texas legislative session included several new laws important for the rural Texas landowner and ag producers. So good to see some legislative laws moving forward in the favor of our listeners.
Well, Tanner, to switch tracks here to talk international news, China this week banned beef imports from JBS's Swift beef plant in Greeley, Colorado, after U.S. officials found traces of ractopamine in the meat. China also blocked meat and poultry from a plant in Oakland, California. However, they didn't state why that plant was being blocked. The USDA reported this week that they expect ag exports to China will fall by $6 billion this fiscal year, according to their outlook for U.S. agricultural trade. At an estimated $27.7 billion, this would be the smallest trade with China since 2020. Noting the reason for the decline, the USDA stated the strong soybean and corn competition we're seeing from South America, specifically Brazil, would be the biggest contributing factor to the lower exports headed to China. Canada and Mexico are expected now to take number 1 and number 2 trading partners ahead of China this year for the first time in quite some time, but that certainly won't be favorable for producers' pocketbooks.
That's right. Donald Trump didn't get some favorable news. A Manhattan jury found Donald Trump guilty of all 34 counts of falsifying business records in his hush money criminal trial. An unprecedented and historic verdict that makes him the first former U.S. president to be convicted of a felony. Judge Merkin set the sentencing hearing for July 11th. Trump's sentence is up to the judge, but it could include prison time or probation. Trump has stated his legal team will appeal the jury's decision. But now it's time for a great conversation with Todd Harmeyer of Ihle Fabrication. So let's get into that conversation now. Well, welcome to the podcast.
You bet. Perfect. I tell you what, I appreciate you guys, the studio, inviting us in here. That's awesome that we can visit and talk about this. This is great. You bet.
Okay, so start off by telling us a little bit about Ihle Fabrication.
So Mike and Brian Ihle, for many years, they work on their equipment. They always have, to support the farming for expense-wise or anything like that. And, of course, as the harvesting and things come around and the expenses of it, they're always looking for different ideas. So Mike and Brian together as two farmers to subsidize a bad year of farming possibly, they came up with a good idea of a fix that the Case International Combine had issues with from some years ago. So Mike and Brian put together a kit that actually fixed an expensive part of that combine. And back at the time, I guess, talking to Mike, a $350 fix besides the fact that they don't pay themselves for a $22,000 repair at your case dealer.
Whoa.
Yes, very much so. So Mike and Brian both ventured off with that. You know, it was kind of a funny story, actually, because, you know, you're going through the field and at the combine that boys were using at that time, they're unloading in the field, and then you lose a complete unloading system. It's not very good during harvest time. So anyway, they take the combine to their nearest dealer, their case dealer, and this is how they get started. They come back with this huge quote, and Mike said, "Oh, no, we're not doing that. We're trading combines next year, so we're not going to put that much money in this combine." So, of course, they come back to the farm and rig up some cardboard and the whole works to get this fabricating going underneath and under their unloading system. They come up with this great idea to fix this. And back in the time, you say $350, where did that come from? Well, you used your local fabricating in Ames, Iowa, to roll this steel and put it together, and the boys welded it in, and that's where the venture really, really started with Ihle's.
So what was the first part they fixed?
It's the vertical repair kit is what it was called.
Okay.
And so anyway, so I think is going fast forward with the guys and the expense of that machine that they were running, and then they traded and went to a larger machine the next year, thinking, you know, we're not going to go to this, wear a machine out. So they started coming up with creative ideas of the machine wearing out, you know, rolling steel and so on and so forth. So, and then I want to say, because I was done farming, but then watched it and continued with the guys around. And about 2008, I think, was just kind of one of those tough years where, you know, you make or break it, and the boys farmed quite a few acres. And so, you know, what do we do to subsidize for farming? How do we continue to grow or, you know, make that paycheck, you know, back and forth, you know? So they made different ideas throughout that combine. Well, then next thing you know, Mike and Brian are writing letters and throwing stuff together and thinking, hey, how can we do this? Well, the local neighbor that sells equipment invited them down to the farm show down in Des Moines.
Right.
And so that's where it started there. So they handed out flyers, and they had a picture of their kit and actually a kit by them. And, hey, Mike, Brian, how'd you fix your combine? And that's where it started. And then so from there, many hours later, you know, the guys are throwing pamphlets in the mail, visiting different dealers, talking to different farmers. How do you do this, you know, and so on and so forth. So today, where we are today, thinking coming from the farm, 3 guys, you know, the 2 boys, Brian and Mike's 2 boys, got together working in the factory. And the next thing you know, a retired guy comes in for welding and it just spun out of control is where we are. So
I love that story. I think so many farmers can relate to that, because I know a lot of farmers that will duct tape things or MacGyver things together. And that's really, it sounds like, where Ihle's start was. They had a problem. They wanted to fix it. They maybe didn't know at the time it was going to be this huge business that it is today. But I'm curious, Todd, how did your story with Ihle start?
So being down the road and all the trouble we caused together, we've always known each other, so it is pretty easy. The guys' mechanical side, I always worked on the boys' semis. So the relationship from there. So really fast forward, because I don't have many hours. So as Freightliner went and the corporate grew, and it was no fun for my job, and Mike and Brian building a business together, was knowing that they were going to go from the farm side to a factory, which our local, there was a Pioneer facility that Mike's been driving by. His place sits right next to it. He's been driving by it for, I don't know how many years. But instead of building onto their farm and making that the place, they decided, hey, let's look into this facility here. So they had purchased that. And, you know, I remember back up, Mike ended up hiring me at the right time of the year. I was in a 90-degree bus and pulling seats out, and really, basically, hate to say it, but didn't like my job anymore. So Mike calls me at the right time and says, hey, we're growing in this business that we're in today. You want to be my salesman? And I didn't hesitate. You bet. I don't care if I ride on the back end of a garbage can right now. So anyway, there's where that went right there. And I told Mike, and so I went out to have an interview on their other partnership and stuff. And I don't know why they hired me, just maybe because we're neighbors, you know, but so.
Sounds like they made a good choice, but I want to get some clarity. So Ihle Fabrications is only combine parts?
They diversify. They try to stay towards the things that we know best. Yeah. You know, and for that being said, Mike and Brian being around red their whole life, that was the main, product that we built. And of course, so many people that come in and it's a factory and you can build this. The equipment that they've purchased and the equipment that we have today can build, literally everything. So yes, they diversify on a few things,
right?
But we make it, and especially since we're with the Case partnership, it's very important that we continue to build up for what they want us to build. And, contracted with those guys and across the United States that we build for, clear into Canada, going into Australia, things like that. So we've got to make sure that the contract we provide, I guess,
right.
That we fulfill the POs per se.
Correct.
And then if there's time, yes, we build other things too. So, and then of course, with that being said, we build the Case part, but why don't we build the John Deere part? So the John Deere guys come after us and say, hey, where's our John Deere parts? Neighbors are starting to ask too. So, going forward with that's become really popular, and that's what we're working on today. So we have a lot of products with the John Deere, reaching out to our local John Deere dealers today in Iowa, separating with John Deere, having a big percentage of the combine, the percent of John Deere
for the marketplace
market is probably a 63 to 23. So there's a lot of green combines out there. So we're building a lot of parts for them, getting a lot of ideas from the farmers, the techs that we're talking to at John Deere today. So anyway, and the unique thing about this from what Mike used to build back in the day was just a mild steel. And then the relationship now that we've tried and error with different AR steel that everybody can purchase. About 4 years ago, Mike started looking into Hardox, which is a construction grade steel, mining, been out there for many, many years. Very hard to maneuver, manipulate, and everything else. So the first purchase of all this equipment that he bought, we're turning that around because that equipment there that we were able to move and bend and roll steel, that didn't work with Hardox. So a different wear. So that's the most important thing about the company.
What's the most common problem you get from a farmer who's looking to have you guys enlist their help and their services for?
So the biggest thing is the high wear. So these combines are getting bigger. And so we're thrashing through larger heads, So of course your Pioneer dealers, your DeKalb dealers, and all those guys, and the seed and the expense of it, the bushels per acre that we're getting now versus what we used to, it's wearing the machines out quicker. So, and then with the economy being the way it is, we're going to be that fit that makes it less expensive to do a repair, and then at a quicker time also. So that's the biggest thing with the product we build today.
Because I know we've got a couple of friends and listeners that have already purchased products because it's sleeves for unload augers. It's like I said, it's all the wear parts.
Mm-hmm.
You're able to provide a potential higher quality than what comes out of the manufacturer to begin with.
Yes, most certainly. So like I said, the Hardox is the biggest thing. So when I go into groups and I talk about it, that's the biggest focus that I can tell people to really look at the product that we sell today. Hardox is a material that is in the high wear. There's Strengths, which is the same company as Hardox. It's just the sister that if you're able to drill it and roll it, that's the other part of it. It's a structural steel also, but you have to be able to build that bubble up liner to install in different areas. And then there's the stainless steel that we use with different gauges for clearance issues and things like that too, that will go in these combines too. So.
Now, Todd, you mentioned earlier the economy. We're a little tighter this year, maybe the next couple of years. We're going to see farmers tightening their belts a little bit. Where do you see what you guys are doing fitting into that mix as far as upgrading equipment versus, like you said, just repairing and maybe upgrading and souping up what you already have?
So economy-wise, really good because the dealers we're talking to right now today, a lot of John Deere, because that's where we're going out to. I got another salesman along with myself. The guys that used to trade are now going to start repairing. So the less inexpensive part, but the better materials, what we're putting into them. The one thing I do stress is that there's a lot of aftermarket companies. I don't really look at our part as an aftermarket. We do build several parts like for like, And then our engineering team, very, very dedicated, very good guys that know what they're doing. They have this equipment. It's fitment. So when we build something, we fit off of the case part. We fit off the John Deere part. Very important to us, because. And then the neighbors that we know, of course, when we do research and development, we'll get the neighbor chimed in to go work on their combines. So we'll actually take the engineers so they know where this product goes, how it functions, the whole part of that combine. Our engineers know that. We used to cuss engineers. Now we want them to understand the whole part of it. So with the technician and the engineering, installing this is very important. So that way, if we have technicians and the installer, their end user, when they go to put it in, and if they cuss that product at all, it's not a really good seller. So if we can redesign it to make it fit a little better, we'll see those too. So,
is that how your engineers come up with the ideas for new parts and new products? Is it hanging out with the neighbors?
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, so the biggest thing is like yesterday, going to the different dealers. Why don't you build this, or can you look at this? And in different parts of the country, of course, Washington, you don't think about it here in Iowa, but there's a lot of lava. So the lava wears the equipment out. In Nebraska, you'll have the what they call glass sand that wears it out, equipment real fast. You go down to Arkansas where you see a lot of rice. The rice machine is almost like there's something that came into that machine and ate it up. It's terrible. It's really a hard abrasive.
Right.
So it's, we do corn and beans around here. Beans is really hard on our equipment, but the rice is really tears these combines up. So,
wow.
So you're mentioning all these different geographies, which sparks another question for me. You're located here in central Iowa, but what geography do you guys cover at Ihle?
Since we partnered up with Case, it's easy to put the footprint out a little further because of the Case guys that we partnered up with. So their sales team and our team. So across the United States, it's all the Case dealers. And then now with John Deere, it's the partnership with the dealership between themselves. So John Deere has the option to sell our equipment if they choose to. And so what we do is we reach out to the dealer. We have our local dealer, of course, we've known for many years, so they're a part of it. So what we did as far as the John Deere is we're building the Iowa dealership with John Deere, and then working to the Illinois. The heavy states of the grain market is what we're looking at, because I'm sure we can get ourselves behind it with all the John Deere. So
that's correct. So if our listeners, though, have a problem of their own or have an idea that they want you guys to look into, can they reach out and ask?
Yeah. So if they have any questions at all, they can let us know at Ihle Fabrication. And then their local John Deere dealer that we've been into, because we're working on it today. So a lot of your Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, we're working into Kansas quite a bit. A lot of dealers are starting to, there's going to be that dealer that if they hear us today, if their local dealer doesn't know anything about us, it's not because we haven't tried. We're trying to get into the John Deere dealers, but we have to watch. We're going from inside out, I guess. So, yep. So it's like I said, we're building the connection with the John Deere.
I know this conversation is timely, Delaney, because not only my family, but even neighbors around here are all getting their combines ran through right now. Mm-hmm. They're all in the service shop. It's not too soon to start thinking about harvest. So we've got some exciting news to share with our listeners, too. If they reach out to Ihle, don't forget to use the code AND24. So that's Ag News Daily, just abbreviated, AND24. And you guys are going to offer them a discount.
You bet. Sounds like it. You bet. So call us at Ihle's, and we'll be happy to answer any of your questions. And
I love it. I appreciate the straightforwardness, the farmer-started to farmer-focused direction that Ihle Fabrications has. And I know our listeners are going to think the same.
Yep. And I know the neighbors around here really appreciate you guys. I think it's neat what you do, and really super glad that you invited us in. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
That's great.
And from Ihle's, too.
You bet. Thanks, Todd, for hanging out with us.
You bet. Thank you.
Well, Tanner, I certainly learned quite a bit there with Todd, so appreciate him coming on the podcast, and hopefully our listeners did as well. As we look at some market commentary for this week, storms, as Tanner mentioned earlier, are expected to roll through the southern plains this weekend at a very timely period when much of the wheat-growing region could certainly use it. Wheat futures did not respond favorably to the news, and Chicago and KC hard red winter wheat both appeared affected by that news, dropping double digits on Thursday, pulling spring wheat along with it. The southern half of Russia's crop is still under major drought and freeze stress. Analysts are suggesting that between 1.5 and 2 million hectares of crops may have been adversely impacted by these spring freezes in Russia. Russian consultancy Sovecon cut their wheat production estimate to 82.1 million metric tons over the holiday weekend, while ICAR lowered their production estimates to 81.5 million metric tons. Ukraine's wheat production estimate has now been lowered to 19.1 million metric tons after just experiencing their driest 30 days in the past 45 years for this period, with the greatest concerns being over the eastern half of Ukraine's wheat belt. And the latest cattle on feed report released last Friday showed the total number of U.S. cattle on feed for slaughter in feedlots with a capacity of more than 1,000 head totaled 11.6 million as of May 1st, only about 1% below 2023 levels. As of May 1st, total placements in feedlots totaled 1.66 million head, 6% below 2023 levels. So prices should remain relatively stable as we continue to see some of those lower inventory numbers for cattle, Tanner.
Yeah, it didn't seem like a surprise, but in the stock markets this week, the Dow Jones took a pretty major hit following 3 straight sessions lower this week, with the 6th session lower in the last trading days. The U.S. GDP data shows that the U.S. economy slowed down in the first quarter of 2024 at just 1.3%, but most analysts don't see that trend continuing in the second quarter. Growth estimates are coming in at 3% plus for the average trade expectation. This potential second quarter strength may impact the Fed's position and indicate a higher for longer interest rate consensus. But meanwhile, multiple companies such as Hormel Foods, Salesforce, and Vita have reported recent losses in their public stocks. So I know there was several headlines related to investments this week, Delaney, that didn't make those headlines a surprise either.
No, they certainly didn't, but a little bit of a mixed bag there for the overall economy, Tanner.
So Delaney, it was Memorial Day this week. Did you participate in the Murph workout?
Thank you for asking. I actually did. It was a great workout, first time I've ever done it, but it was a fun one.
So what's the hardest part about it? The workout itself or how sore you are afterwards?
It's funny you ask that because after the workout was finished, I was thinking, wow, that was pretty easy. I thought I was going to have a lot more challenge with it. But then the last, 4 days following, I've been unable to walk super well. So I'm going to say the follow-up. But it was a great workout. It's in honor of a former lieutenant who didn't make it home from, I believe, Afghanistan was this hero workout, but it was a really good time to honor and remember those who have served our country.
That's right. And thank you to all of you who have served. We appreciate that. We also thank all of you as listeners. If you have any feedback for us, make sure you hit us up on social media, like and share these clips. We'd greatly appreciate it. But what do you say, Delaney? Is it time to let the listeners go?
Let's let them go.